Studies show low-carb diets reverse insulin resistance. Low-fat diets do not. Dr. Ben Bikman.
Another study. Here are the average levels at baseline. What we found was insignificant changes in glucose in either diet. That's not too surprising. Those glucose levels are already pretty good. Insulin tended to go up on the low-fat group. It tended to go down in the low-carbohydrate group. And these differences became even more obvious with the measurement of insulin resistance, where the insulin resistance score started at 1.28. This is the HOMA score. It went up, meaning insulin resistance got worse in the low-fat group, and it went down, meaning insulin resistance got better in the low-carbohydrate group. Insulin in the insulin-resistant group was 16 microunits, and then it was 5 in the insulin-sensitive group. When both groups were put on a low-fat diet, there was an insignificant change. Insulin didn't really go anywhere. In contrast, on the low-carbohydrate diet, something interesting happened. The insulin-sensitive group didn't really experience any benefit. They're already insulin-sensitive, although importantly, both of these groups were controlled for body mass. So these were people of similar body weight. However, the insulin-resistant group had a significant reduction in insulin on a low-carbohydrate diet. I think there's something very relevant about these findings. But if you're insulin-resistant and you're trying to improve your metabolic health, clearly there's a winner here, and that would be the low-carbohydrate diet. Now, in conclusion, how might you or those around you, patients or loved ones, be able to determine whether they are insulin resistant? I think there are two strategies. The first one is to look at your fasting insulin. If the fasting insulin is less than 6 microunits per mil, or in picomoles it's less than around 40, that's a good sign. That's evidence that the person is insulin sensitive. However, insulin, like every hormone, has its own rhythm, and it's possible you'd get someone and you measure their insulin at a peak, and maybe they're in the low teens. And you would say, well, that's higher than Ben said, and that could be a problem. Well, if it's low teens, could still be good. All the more reason to look at the next measurement of insulin sensitivity, and that's the fasting lipids, the triglyceride to HDL ratio. If that dividend is less than 1.5, that's a very good sign that the person is insulin sensitive. If it's higher than 1.5, that's a warning that they likely are insulin resistant. In conclusion, I just want to emphasize the fact that we are all worried about type 2 diabetes, and rightly so, as it's increasing globally. We need to remember that type 2 diabetes is generally going to be, if not always, a consequence of a mounting insulin resistance. And it's the insulin resistance that I submit starts in the fat cell, and then it moves through the rest of the body as the first domino falls and tumbles into the subsequent domino.
Studies show low-carb diets reverse insulin resistance. Low-fat diets do not. Dr. Ben Bikman. In a study of low-fat versus low-carb of overweight women, the results showed glucose stayed about the same in both groups. Insulin in the low-fat group was up. Insulin in the low-carb group was down. Insulin resistance in the low-fat group, up. In the low-carb group, down. And Dr. Bikman says, HOMA got worse in the low-fat diet. HOMA-IR, Homeostatic Model Assessment for Insulin Resistance, an index to determine if a patient is insulin resistant. In another study, insulin resistant versus insulin sensitive groups. Both groups given a low-fat diet, no change in insulin. When given a low-carb diet, the insulin-sensitive group, no change. So the insulin-resistant group had a significant reduction in their insulin resistance, but only on the low-carb diet. One of Dr. Bikman's conclusions. How to tell whether we're insulin resistant? Well, get your fasting insulin checked. Good if it's less than 6 microunits per milliliter. It's possible that insulin's rhythm is at a peak when you get tested. If it's in the low teens, you could still be okay. How to tell whether insulin resistant? You can use the triglyceride to HDL ratio. You're good if it's less than 1.5, but it should be considered a warning if you're greater than 1.5. Type 2 diabetes is increasing worldwide due to mounting insulin resistance. It starts in the fat cells and moves through the rest of the body.
Annotated and summarized, easy to share with loved ones. To access these annotations, go to doctorstotrust.com or see the description below this video's title.